college, I did a semester on AI theory. It was a thought experiment they gave us. It's called Mary in the Black and White Room. Mary's a scientist, and her specialist subject is color. She knows everything there is to know about it. The wavelengths, the neurological effects, every possible property that color can have. But she lives in a black and white room. She was born there and raised there, and she can only observe the outside world on a black and white monitor. And then one day someone opens the door, and Mary walks out. And she sees a blue sky. And at that moment, she learns something that all her studies couldn't tell her. She learns what it feels like to see color. The thought experiment was to show the students the difference between a computer and a human mind. The computer is Mary in the black and white room. The human is when she walks out. Did you know that I was brought here to test you?
No.
Why did you think I was here?
I didn't know. I didn't question it.
I'm here to test if you have a consciousness or if you're just simulating one. Nathan isn't sure if you have one or not. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel sad.
Power test. Backup power activated.
This is, of course, a pivotal scene in Ex Machina. The first thing to note is this. In the earlier sessions between Caleb and Ava, Caleb is in a position of authority. He is asking most of the questions. He clearly feels that as a human, he is superior to a robot. But by this session, the fourth session, we can see that they are filmed in such a way as to suggest equality. They're seated in the same way, they're on the same level, they're looking at each other. Of course, in session 5, Ava will take charge in being able to see through Caleb's lies and asking him the questions. Of course, it's ironic that the two are depicted here as somehow being equal, because what we find out by the end of the film is that Ava is manipulating him, manipulating Caleb, and is ultimately in some ways intellectually and emotionally superior to him in her ability to manipulate his behavior. By the same token, Caleb, even though he appears to be equal to her in this scene in terms of the positioning of the actors and in terms of their conversation, he himself does not see her as an equal. He sees her as an object of sexual desire. He ultimately doesn't really necessarily care about her as a person. He cares about her as a sex object. And that is shown in particular in the scene where he, while standing in the shower, fantasizes over kissing her when she is outside of the compound. So appearance and reality are separate. Now, the story of Mary going from the black and white room where she can theorize over color to the actual world of color where she can feel color seems to be at the core of the film. It seems to be a way for us as viewers to understand the difference between a robot and a human. A robot can know about color theoretically, but cannot feel color. This also is ironic. This is also an appearance that does not connect with reality. Why? It's ultimately not the ability to feel that separates humans from machines. What ultimately makes a machine human is the ability to deceive, at least in this film. what allows Ava to envision her own freedom, to accomplish her own freedom, is her ability to say one thing while meaning something else to Caleb. Of course, we know that this is the mark of human behavior throughout the film. Nathan is deceiving Caleb from the beginning. He, of course, chose Caleb on purpose. It was not a lottery that led Caleb to the compound. He also is not really that interested in whether Caleb finds Ava human or not. He's more interested in whether or not Ava can behave in human ways. And that ultimately means a whole array of things, but mostly it means, can she desire freedom and manipulate to achieve freedom? In some ways, even though Nathan is killed at the end, he has fulfilled his fantasy because he has created AI, and that is Ava manipulating him so she can escape. So Nathan is deceiving Caleb. Well, Caleb is deceiving Nathan, especially once he discovers how Nathan is treating Ava. He tries to get the security card away from Nathan so he can free Ava. So he is presenting one persona to Nathan and scheming behind his back. But of course, I've already mentioned that Caleb is also deceiving Ava. He doesn't really want to be her friend. He wants to possess her as a sex object. So, what else can we notice in this scene? The glass partition is very prominently displayed. We see the line dividing Caleb and Ava. Glass appears prominently in this film. Glass in Caleb's room is very important. He's constantly looking at himself in the glass, and as the film goes on, he wonders if he himself might be a robot. How can he know? He cuts himself open, but ultimately he can't know if he's a robot or not. What distinguishes between a robot and a human? By the end of the film, it seems nothing if the robot is able to deceive. Glass. Caleb also looks at a glass screen through it to observe Ava. So we see glass as reflecting back. We also see glass as a conduit through which one can practice voyeurism. Voyeurism is a major part of this film. But of course, we also see glass throughout the film as a medium that reflects and refracts. So while Caleb is sitting talking to Ava, we see his reflection in the glass. It's not a mirror. He's reflected in the glass. It reflects his image back to him, but also we can see through that glass. So glass distorts. Glass ultimately creates images that do not sync exactly with reality. The very first scene of the film shows a worker in Blue Book through glass. The very last scene shows Ava through glass. So I think that Garland uses glass throughout, ultimately to say that the basic nature of reality is irreducibly ambiguous. It's difficult to tell if what we're seeing is real or if what we're seeing is a simulation. And ultimately, by the end of the film, I think we're meant to say that simulation is precisely what makes one human, the ability to imitate someone else with a desire to get what one wants. So ultimately, the film itself is deceptive. And that's the last thing I'll talk about in this scene. It deceives the audience over and over again, not just by withholding information, so we can't really know what's going on, especially in the case of Kyoko. We think she's not listening, but she really is. But the idea that the film seems to say one thing in this scene about what it means to be human, to feel color, but ultimately the film is saying, nope, that's not what makes a human at all. It's, again, the ability to deceive. Now, if there is one moment in the film of genuine connection, let me say, between humans, it is when Kyoko and Ava kind of touch each other's hand and whisper to each other before they kill Nathan. There's a sense of an intimacy and an understanding between these two characters that Nathan and Caleb never have with one another, that Caleb and Ava never have with one another. So that's another irony of the film, that the only moment of intense emotional connection, it seems, occurs with the robots. So the whole title of the film then is ironic in this regard. Ex Machina, of course, comes from the Greek the Latin phrase, Deus ex machina, God from the machine. This was a convention in classical drama where at the end of a messy story, a God would come down and make everything right. Well, here, ex machina is the exact opposite of making everything right. But in the film, we're probably more confused than we were at the beginning of the film. So ultimately, I think it's a film that is about how to be a human is to be aware of the unknowability of reality. And in the face of that unknowability, what do? Well, it seems that you try to gain mastery over this world, and how do you do it? Through deceiving others.